Welcome to Cosmic Comics, Games and Collectibles, your zen of geekism. We carry comics old and new, magazines, toys, games like Pokemon, Magic, D&D. Want Godzilla, Ultraman, Star Trek, Ninja Turtles, Funko Pops? You'll find it all here. Shop our Cosmic Sound Room and pick up a record or two. Enjoy our Comic Coffee Lounge with a cup of Sasquatch coffee or a delicious menu item while geeking out over a super cool movie on our big screen. Come by and say hello to Maui. Cosmic Comic, Games and Collectibles. Superman loves us, and so will you.
And good evening, everybody. I am RJ Carter, Senior Managing Editor here at criticalblast.com, where once again we are going to show our love for the independent crowdfunded comics. Boy, there's a perfect looking glare on what physics, folks. The what you want to put in the camera will always have a glare right there across the important stuff. Yes, I'm drinking from my Don Chin X-Farce Reloaded coffee mug, which I have reloaded for the 4th time today, with some Cameron's Highlander grog, my favorite cup of coffee. If anyone's looking for Christmas ideas, that's what I tend to drink. We are going to once again look at some crowdfunded comics tonight, and we are proud and privileged to have with us as our guest Mr. Charles Santino. Charles, how are you doing this evening?
Great. Good evening. Thanks for having me.
What are you drinking tonight? Anything at all? I'm
done with my single malt. I'm but chasing it with water.
Oh. I chase my coffee with water, but I have no refrigeration where I'm bordered at right now, so I can't have my beer and my wine and my good stuff.
Well, the single malt is room temperature.
Oh, okay. Well, that's one thing I should keep in mind. Drink some nice warm beer. Before I get too deep into this, I want to make the announcement that we have become monetized, and one of the benefits of being monetized is that people can become members of the channel. We are not striving to become mega wealthy super YouTubers or anything, but we did decide to set one level at the minimum level, for which we will, provide our members with a sticker and a keychain. And I only mention it because we have a member. We have our first member of the channel, Pops Van Zant. Pops, thank you so much.
Pops is everywhere.
He is everywhere. He pops up here and there when you least expect him. And Pops, your sticker and keychain are in the envelope and going to the post office tomorrow, because I know where you live. And I didn't even have to ask you for that one, so it will head out to you soon. Charles, we're going to talk about Rammur tonight here, and this is the book you have up on Indiegogo. But this isn't, this isn't your first rodeo. I mean, this is your 3rd campaign, but you've been in comics for a while now.
Yeah, in and out. Started with Marvel, writing Conan, and doing a few other things for them. Some humor for What The. I don't know if you remember What The.
I remember What The, yeah.
And Savage Tales Volume 2, which was their He-Man anthology. That was my actual start, doing a Jack London pastiche. Pastiche is a fancy word for ripoff.
Sure.
But Jack London's in the public domain, so it's all good.
You said He-Man, I thought, I don't remember them doing Masters of the Universe.
Was their version of a men's sweat pulp magazine. Didn't last too long, 8 issues, and I managed to slip in the last story in the last issue, number 8, which has a great Joe Jusko cover.
Oh, I love Joe Jusko's art.
And that was my start. And I actually wrote a graphic novel for DC, which was written, drawn, inked, lettered. And then in the crash of 94, DC canceled a lot of things, including everything that was not part of their universe. And this was a standalone creator-owned work that was not part of their universe. They still have it. They still own it. It's in their vaults.
They'll never publish it.
It'll never ever be published. But I went on to work for Fantagraphics and Bantam Books and Penguin, and Filipino publisher, and right now I also write 3 web comics for Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Oh, do you know Michael Tierney?
I know the name. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, he was my LCS shop guy when I was. LCS shop is kind of redundant, isn't it? He was my LCS guy when I lived in Little Rock. And he's part of our LCS guys show every other Saturday night, coming up this Saturday night. But he is doing what is that? I keep wanting to say the one that's C.S. Lewis, but it's he's doing the Edgar Rice Burroughs space fantasy.
The Mars, or not the Mars,
not the Mars one.
The Venus, Carson of Venus.
Yeah, I think he's doing I'm not even going to say Carson of Venus. He's doing one.
It's interplanetary.
Yes, it's interplanetary,
Yeah.
And he's done the whole Edgar Rice Burroughs art chronology. These huge, thick art books that are just reproducing every Edgar Rice Burroughs cover, from the pulps to the comics to the novels, in high def of each one. He's been finding the originals.
Yeah. By the time I got there, found out about the webcomics and was pitching, all the science fiction and fantasy was taken, and I didn't even realize how prolific Edgar Rice Burroughs was, and that he had written a lot of mainstream stuff. And the stuff I've been doing are murder mysteries and melodramas, and some very interesting stuff. Some of it goes back as far as 1915, and some of it's a bit dated and a bit creaky, but pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's he did write a lot, and sometimes I'll run across things that I didn't know he did. I'm finding science fiction stories done by people that I didn't know did science fiction, so it works the other way as well. I think Cursova Magazine, Cursova Publications has found The Cosmic Courtship by Hawthorne. It was Nathaniel Hawthorne's son, Julian, did this thing. When science fiction was like, oh, there's this newish thing we're doing with scientific interplanetary stories.
Now, what year approximately would that have been?
Oh my gosh, I should know this.
In the teens.
Yeah, definitely in the teens. I mean, probably maybe even before that. I have. Hang on just a moment. I've got it here. In my stack of things that I still need to read deeper. How did I manage to tie my headphones in a knot in just such a short amount of time? Yeah, this is Julian Hawthorne, and The Cosmic Courtship was serialized in Frank A. Muncie's All Story Weekly across 4 issues, beginning with November 24th, 1917.
Now that would have been contemporaneous with Tarzan in the same magazine.
I believe it would have, yes.
Yeah.
So they kind of found this just sitting around, gone into public domain. Nobody knew about it, and
it's interesting what is in the public domain. One of the projects that I tried to crowdfund was Little Fuzzy by H. Beam Piper. And that was written in the early 60s, but it's already in the public domain because he died by his own hand shortly after writing that book. And somehow his publisher forgot to renew the copyright 28 years later.
Oh, goodness.
So Little Fuzzy is something written in the early 60s that is free, clear, and in the public domain.
So take it and run.
Yep.
I think the same thing must be true with, like, there are so many comic characters that are public domain but not public domain. I've toyed with the idea of doing something with a public domain character, but the rules are so entrapping, it feels like, that I'm like, you know what, I'm not going to bother risking it.
Yeah, it's a kind of a gray area. The Conan stories, some of them are in the public domain, but the character is not.
Right. And it's like, sometimes the character goes public domain, but only if you use the elements that happened up until the point of it going public domain. Then you got to wait 5 years. Like, say Batman, the first 5 issues had gone public domain. Well, that's great, but you've got to wait 5 years before you can actually put a car into the story. You can't have a Batmobile because he didn't have one in any of the public domain stories before that point.
Right. Your better off creating your own character.
Exactly. Although everybody seems to be doing the Black Terror, so he must be just free and clear.
Yeah. But
So,
it becomes a crowded field.
Yeah, it does. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody's got a Black Terror now, and they have since the '80s. I remember Airboy had the Black Terror in it. But you have created your own characters.
I have.
And Rammur is one of those books where you've done that. So tell me a little bit about that. Is Rammur a guy, or is that a world, or
he is a guy? And I do want to give credit where credit is due. I am a co-creator. 3 artists contributed to the distinct visual likeness of Rammur, and that would be Joe Staten. He was the first person to draw Rammur, and then Andrew Wendell, whose name is not that familiar to a lot of people. He did stuff for Valiant in the 90s. And Paulo Perez is the last guy to take a hack at Rammur. And so the way Rammur looks today is Paulo's doing. He's based in Brazil. He's my primary artist on this book. And Rammur is a guy. The name comes from the Ram Scoop, which is on his chest, hidden by that shirt right now. Ram Scoop is a very old science fiction idea where a Ram Scoop would scoop up hydrogen atoms and convert it into energy. It would be used on a starship, but he's got one on his chest, and on his back, he has a compact fusion reactor, which I like to say, if you think that's ridiculous, is it any more ridiculous than a guy who was bitten by a radioactive spider?
Yeah. Think of a guy who has a heart attack and operates on himself and just shoves a battery in there.
Exactly. So we'll stretch things for the sake of adventure.
Exactly. I'm surprised that at the artist that you mentioned here, because I was looking at the picture up here, and then further down, I'm like, this is a very European, almost a French kind of look to it. So I would have expected you had artists coming out of that arena.
Yeah, the idea was I did a search for artists who could draw in the animated style of some of the DC comics of the 90s, the Batman animated, Superman, and other characters. And I found Paulo. I wouldn't say there's a European flavor so much as maybe an international flavor. He's definitely doing, Paulo's definitely doing his own thing with this. But my guidance was let's look at the animated style.
All right. Well, speaking of animated style, let's take a look at the animated video. As animated as it may be, I don't know. I haven't watched it. It's always a surprise for me.
There's some motion.
Well, we're going to give it a play and see how this looks. And it takes about 10 minutes to load a video for some reason when I use StreamYard. So. I hope that's public domain music. I'm going to get another strike.
No, I paid for it. Yeah, I paid for it.
Oh, well, you paid for it. You can play for it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not a big heavy metal fan, but that music works. And the video was put together by Marco Perugini, who's an Italian artist, using Paulo's artwork, but he created the video. He's my backup artist for the short stories that back up the lead stories in Rammur.
It's an interesting concept. I love the idea that, you know, whenever your main character is a thief, I don't know why. If you tell us to root for the bad guy and you write a good story, we're going to root for the bad guy. And I'm guessing that he is kind of sort of a bad guy, or is he?
He's a bad guy, but in such a bad society that virtually everybody he's up against is worse than him. So, yeah, I kind of look at him as a Judge Dredd perp, but most of the people he goes up against are slimier and have no integrity. I mean, his needs are simple and his code is simple. He won't kill anybody just for the sake of it, because that kind of puts you on the radar of the authorities. His needs are simple. He's interested in money and women. That's about it.
He doesn't look like he takes any guff off of anybody either. He's a big guy, big grimacing guy.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a panel yet that he's smiling in. Maybe I don't remember.
And he doesn't strike me as being all that stealthy. He looks like he's a loud kind of person to be a thief.
Yeah, he will not create an undue commotion, but if he's found out and needs to bust his way out, he will.
He's a big smash and grab guy. So what is his story here? What's the world that he lives in? It's a future police state.
Yeah, and rather than the standard cliched post-apocalyptic world, it is the future where a single authority, the Global Freedom Authority, runs everything. And life is actually not that bad if you don't value freedom. The reason being is that they've figured out the secret of almost cost-free hydrogen energy. So there's a pretty good economy that can support a pretty big population, even though there's very little incentive to work, because you're kind of under the thumb of the GFA. But I wanted a look like Metropolis. I wanted to be clean and sparkling, and yet dystopian in that you do live in a society where one of the slogans for TOPS, Tales of the Police State, the co-feature is, in the future you will be a criminal, meaning that there's so many rules that if you go to the bathroom the wrong time of day, you might be breaking some law.
That figures. And when you say Metropolis, I'm assuming you're talking about the Fritz Lang version, not
No, I'm actually talking about Superman's Metropolis. Spanking clean and new, as opposed to Gotham.
So it's all bright and colorful. It's sort of like but while being bright and colorful, it's not that Carmine Infantino optimistic future at all.
Oh, hardly. This scene is the splash page. Rammur is trying to steal that sculpture. He's been hired to steal that sculpture, but these two guys that he knows from previous heists and he's not particularly fond of, they found out about it and they got the jump on him, and it's not going to go well for these two guys.
Okay, it's an interesting name, Rammur. How'd you come up with that? Initially,
it was Rammur ER. Based on the idea of the ram scoop on his chest, right. But I wanted the web address for the character's name, and that was taken by a company in Finland that sells heavy equipment. So I thought, okay, I can't have that web address. And then I thought, how about RAMMAR? That still would sound like Rammur. And I looked that up, and that was a chain of grocery stores in Turkey. So that was taken. So then I tried, okay, let's see, RAMMUR, still could be Rammur. That was free and clear, so I grabbed it.
Take the one that comes up. Yeah. So many .coms are grabbed. I know when we were starting up, we had a whole list of brainstormed names, and it was pretty much the first one that was open and available across all social media. We're like, yes, grab that one. Here we go. Lock them down.
And I figured, no problem. It still can be pronounced Rammur. And because it's kind of weird, that's okay, because this is a science fiction future.
Sure. It's weird to the eye, but it's pronounceable.
Yeah, there's also, I also discovered when I tried Googling that name, that I think it might actually be a name in India.
Okay.
Which that's okay, because this is a kind of a pan-global world in the future. Who knows where this guy actually came from, what his roots are. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I can live happily with that name. I hate when I get into a science fiction or a fantasy book and the name is long and there's 7 apostrophes in it.
You're preaching to the choir. I feel like I'm pretty good with names. I don't feel like I'm nearly as good with the titles of stories. I really work hard, and I'm never 100% satisfied with the titles of stories. But the characters' names, I'm always okay with. The other characters in this first story, his mechanic who fixes his ram scoop gear is named Gunnigle, Gunnigle, which I think might actually be a real name. I like that. And the apprentice of Gunnigle is a young woman named Snowberry. And I like that name. I like the names I come up with. I'm satisfied with them immediately. The title of the story is Dead on the Ground. It's an okay title. You'll only know what it means once you're done with the story. But we have our strengths and our weaknesses.
Yeah, I've always been told you title the story after it's done, and yet I tend to find titles first. I'm like, oh, I know the story that goes with that title, and I build off of that. So I'm completely bass-ackwards on it.
Yeah, the third story has a title I really like, Powerhouse Road.
And that's
going to be the third story in the third issue. So that'll be quite some time down the road. But I was driving somewhere, and I saw a road sign. And the name of the road was Powerhouse Road because it was in the middle of nowhere, and down at the end of the road was a powerhouse. And I thought, boy, that stuck with me for years and years. And I decided I would use that as a title of a story at some point.
Now, your book is being printed on newsprint, which is not something that most people go with. Why did you angle for that?
I like it. That's about it. That's about it. It has nothing to do with marketing, or that there's a vast group of people out there waiting for newsprint. Although there is that publisher Alterna that prints entirely on newsprint, and there are other newsprint comics, but it's they are few and far between.
Now, you have to and at least I think you have to, because I've read some newsprint comics, and some of them have been Alterna comics, and I found some of them hard to read because it was like they were designed with the modern printing and coloring and all that, and I don't think the newsprint was capable of really delivering.
You're exactly right. So
you got to plan ahead.
It's tough, yeah. And I told Paulo right from the get-go what I was looking for with the coloring, and that we would be on newsprint. And Paulo is great because he pencils, inks, and colors. So it doesn't cost me more or less to do it that way, but it's a lot easier to just have to deal with one person. And Marco Perugini, who does the backup stories, he also colors his own pencils and inks as well. So with those two guys, it's I could potentially have 6 people doing those things, and I've only got 3.
You'll have a whole publishing house working on a title here real soon. How many? How big is this book? How many pages are we looking at?
It'll be 48 pages. The lead story is 24 pages. Backup story by Marco is 6 pages, and then there's a couple of stories, Tops, Tales of the Police State, These are funky, nasty little vignettes, kind of depressing about what life is like, everyday life is like in a police state. And they're kind of alternative in that they would appeal more to a Fantagraphics reader than the kind of pulpy, guilty pleasure of Rammur. And the reason I came up with Tops was that originally Rammur was going to be a webcomic, and my artist at the time wasn't fast enough to do the webcomic. So I thought, well, I'll have a co-feature and I'll alternate pages. And that's how I came up with Tops. And it was kind of a lucky thing that it was a matter of necessity. And I'm really happy with the top stuff. And as we scroll down, you'll see some of that artwork.
Yeah. Now, is there any flavor of the Judge Dredd kind of stuff that goes with this? I mean, when I think of future police states, obviously Judge Dredd is one of the first things people will gravitate
a little bit. I think of him as a Judge Dredd style perp, but we don't really get too much of the police state in the main stories. In the Rammur stories, it's just kind of in the background. There are robot cops that we see, and the GFA is kind of ever present in the background. It's the Tops Tales of the Police stories where the police state really comes to the forefront. I'm getting a little bit of an echo here.
I'm going to unshare and reshare.
Okay.
Maybe that will help. I don't know.
That's better. No echo.
Okay. Now when I reshare, I will not share with audio because we played the video. We don't need it now. Okay. How's that now?
Yeah, better.
Okay, good. Is there a digital version of this? I didn't.
Yeah, it's available right now on Comixology. The whole issue, 48 pages, $2.99, which I'm hoping that people buy it and look at it and think, I really would like to have a print version of this. The print version is going to be limited to 500 copies. And as I kind of somewhat humorously posted in Facebook the other day, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1 had a print run of 3,000 copies. So this is going to be 6 times as rare as that first issue of the Turtles.
There you go. And you never know. It actually could. We're going to see some stuff, I think, out of this whole crowdfunding movement really, truly take off.
Something will hit. Yes, something will come out of it, no doubt. Yeah, I actually I don't envy the job of the people who run the studios and look for things, because their job has become so much harder to try to wade through these oceans of IP that keep washing up on the shore, that they have to wade through and try to find something that they can exploit.
True. But I think at the same time, Charles, if you just have some data miners, they could just say, okay, well, let's look at all the comics on Kickstarter and sort by funding amount in a descending order. Well, look how much money this one made. Obviously, there's a demand. Maybe it makes their job a little easier.
That's true. They might be that clever. In the case of Marcosia, I'm kind of a hybrid, because I'm a pro, but now I'm independent, but I'm not completely independent because I have a publisher. And Marcosia does have people in Hollywood who are agenting his books, the stuff that he publishes. So I do have that advantage, and I do have a method for people in a position to do something about it to see this stuff.
Excellent, because this would easily translate to animation. Obviously, it's already
that was the idea. And when I decided on the animated style, part of the reason was I like it. Another reason for doing it that way was I thought that it would be easier to find multiple artists who could do it in that style, and that it would be faster for them. I mentioned that in a Facebook post, and some artist came at me and told me, no, it doesn't, it's not any quicker to draw this way than any other way. And I'm not sure I buy that.
Maybe not for him.
Yeah, I'm not sure I buy that. There are fewer lines. Yes, you've got to do the composition, you've got to do the rendering and all of that. But I look at some of the art that I see in some of the crowdfunding, and it's so sophisticated and so detailed there's no way it doesn't take longer than this.
Yeah, and it's good to know that in the future, young teenagers are still going to keep their jeans when they get all ripped up and vape on.
Yeah, well, she's we don't talk about what it is she's got in that hookah. I like to think that it's a tobacco for the simple reason that I don't think Rammur would trust his gear to a pothead.
Yeah, more than likely not. And in the future police state, probably tobacco is highly illegal, so it would be something illicit.
That's a real good question. I don't know. I haven't really thought about whether tobacco is illegal or not in this future police state, but you've given me something to think about.
Pete Hoffman, Hauptman, did a book called Rash, which is a really fun read, and it came out like 15 years ago or more. And it was about a world where everything that could possibly hurt you had been regulated and or made illegal. So, people in school playing, there was no football, but, whenever you went out for PE, you were like completely bubble wrapped and padded, and there was no way you could possibly get hurt. And it was this, and if you did try to hurt yourself, there was something wrong with you. Cigarettes were obviously one of the very, very illegal things. They were very contraband. You could go to jail for having them.
The more detailed you get in the rules and regulations of any future society is you have to be careful not to paint yourself into a corner and have the reader thinking about things that are really not important to the story. It's tough to strike a balance between world building and clutter.
Yeah. Well, in Rash, that was the whole point of the story, was that everything had been made safe. And the one kid breaks the rules and he's thrown in prison. He's got to escape and get back.
Here we see the robot police I was telling you about.
Yeah, I like the nice bullet heads.
Yeah, they're called Ruptors. I think that might be short for disruptors.
You think you created them, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't explain it. I threw it out there and I used the word, and I'm thinking that that's probably what people are going to figure. It's got to be short for disruptor. That staircase there. I give the artist a lot of photo reference, and I gave him reference for that stone stairway there. Okay. That female figure, that is Dami. Dominatrix is the big sister of this future police state. She may or not be a real a person. She's a figurehead. Her image is everywhere. There's propaganda posters. There's statues. She's on the money. And we never really see a human person. So kind of like Big Brother was maybe not a real person. Big Sister Dominatrix is probably not a real person either.
Okay. Now with that name like that, I'm going to ask, is this an all ages book or?
It is. There's a bunch of stuff in the story and in the names that people have called me on. And I tell people it's there. It's not intentional, but it's evident. It's definitely PG-13. There's a little bit of violence, a little bit of blood, no nudity. The sex is implied. Cursing is, maybe hell and damn. That's about it. So PG-13 or a 12 plus, whatever they're calling it today. That's about the level.
And again, with that statue of Dominatrix, I'm once more recalling Fritz Lang's Metropolis and the rope. I forget her name now, but
there was a bunch of names. I'll tell you an interesting story about Metropolis. I approached the rights holders, the German rights holders, about doing a prequel, an authorized prequel.
Oh.
And I got the rights. I wrote it and got demo art done by Dean Motter from Mr. X.
Yeah, and The Prisoner.
Nobody was interested. I pitched it. Well, the problem with crowdfunding it is there's two German rights holders. There's the publisher of the book and the daughter of the sculptor who created the robot and all the other sculpted images in the movie. She has the rights to those distinct visual likenesses.
Okay.
She wanted $2,000 American. The publisher wanted another $2,000. So anybody who would do it would have to pay $4,000 up front. Then that's before they paid for a single page of art. So the rights holders in Germany kind of made it impossible, but nobody was really even interested to begin with, because I never even got that far with the publishers in the United States telling them what it would have cost them. They just weren't interested in an authorized prequel to Metropolis.
Well,
I was kind of surprised, but if anybody wants to cough up $4,000, we can get it done.
okay, so we would need to crowdfund $10,000 on this to really make this a project. Okay. The task is set before us. $10,000 for a prequel to Metropolis written by Charles Santino,
and art by Dean Motter. This is the backup story by Marco. And we see again, this is actually a little bit of a slum. There aren't too many slums, but this is a kind of slummy area here, maybe a warehouse type area. We do see Dominatrix, the statue there. He's being followed by a woman who is trying to figure out where he's going, because he just came from a meeting where a bunch of guys pitched a heist to him, and he didn't think it was a particularly good idea. So he walked out, and she thinks that he's going to go do it by himself. So she's following him. And things are not going to work out too well for her.
So as in, like, she's going to...
I'm not going to say exactly. Yeah, well, yeah, he gets the drop on her. It gets a little bit more complicated from there. One of the things I tell the artists is, okay, these characters need to be designed in a way that we're okay never seeing them again, because they're going to snuff it. And these other characters are possibly going to continue, so you got to design them with that in mind. The problem is my artists are so good that every single design is so good that I really feel bad about killing these characters. But these are crime stories, and there's got to be a body count. They're underpopulated in that most of these stories have no more than a handful of characters, but in most of these stories, maybe half of the characters don't make it to the end.
And nothing screams out classic golden age comic book goodness like a gorgeous, sexy woman bound in rope.
Yeah, there's a lot of bondage in Rammur simply because you got to restrain people.
Well, we've got the Rammur manifesto here, so this is his credo.
I can't even read it at that small size.
Yeah, and even if I blew it up like that, but I can read it on my second screen.
Yeah, and if people go to my Facebook page, I do end up posting it probably once a week. It basically says, if you are afraid of a little testosterone, these stories are not for you. And if you like continued stories with a cast of thousands and a story that never ends, this is also not for you.
Yep. No man can stop him. No woman can resist him. No prize can daunt him. So he's definitely inspired by the man's man macho hero. Pulp Fiction
exactly. All the stories are self-contained. The first issue has 4 stories, 24 pages, 6 pages, 4 pages, and 2 pages. They're all self-contained. This was a tryout sheet that I gave Paulo, and I called it Aspects of Rammur. I said, let's see him in every mode of dress and different modes of action. When he's got the red shirt on, he's kind of off duty. Okay. Now, is this Ram Scoop a permanent part of him? Or no, it comes off so it can be serviced.
Okay. So it's not like it's part of his body and he needs to have it. It's more like a fancy jetpack he can put on.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But he's very fond of it, and that's why he takes really good care of it. I assume it's pretty expensive, but I don't get into the details. And speaking of money, you'll see on that bag of money, I created a currency for this world called the Tolar, and that's the symbol for it. I don't like science fiction stories where the future money is credits. That's kind of a huge cliche. But sometimes, and you were talking about apostrophes, sometimes they come up with a name for the currency that's a bit weird and cumbersome and doesn't really go down very nicely. This Tolar is based on the German Thaler, which was an actual unit of currency in Germany hundreds of years ago. And I found out after I created this name that it was actually the currency used by Slovenia in Eastern Europe until 1992 when they abandoned it for the euro.
And you know, it also kind of phonetically sounds like dollar.
That was the idea, because
so,
it gives you the idea that what is going on in this future society evolved from our world in every way, including the currency.
I love stories that do that. I read A Canticle for Leibowitz.
Oh, I love that book.
I didn't understand a damn thing by the time I got to the end of the tales, but I loved it because it did show that that evolution of language, or devolution of language, I guess, at some points. Because you had Leibowitz, and it was Saint Leibowitz, and then all of a sudden the town was San Leibowitz. I'm like, oh, people just started saying it, faster and differently. Where I live here is in the Ozarks, and I've grown up, in not Central America, but the central United States, the Midwest. And there was always, commercials on Lake of the Ozarks, go down to the Ozark country. And it was Ozark. I'm like, I have no idea why it's called that. And then living in Arkansas, I drove through the northwest portion from Little Rock to Bentonville. And there's this park that you go through. And it's the only place I've ever seen it. It's like, the Ozark, and it's AUXARC, and it's French. And it's, of the Ark. And I was like, oh, so this was the
now
Ozark.
You get it.
Yeah. And suddenly, you have a bunch of hillbillies that don't know how to spell, and they're just like Ozark, and they just, spell it the way they want. It's, there are two rivers that run through the area. One is the Washita River, and the other is the Washita River. They're Ouchata and wash like your clothing, Washita. It's just spelled differently because what do we know from spelling French words?
I'm very cagey about how far in the future this takes place. I don't get into that because I don't think it's particularly important. Once you nail that down, then you're kind of locked into a certain future continuity. So I don't say this takes place in the year, whatever.
No, it's indeterminate.
Yeah, it's indeterminate. It's obviously not 4,000 years, but it's also not 4 years.
Yeah, well, the dress and the architecture, it says some of these buildings could exist now, and none of it is Jetsons.
Yeah, no, and that's another thing I don't get into, and that is I'm assuming that there isn't space travel, but I don't really get into that either. I'm trying to keep it as simple as I can. Another aspect of those buildings is everything looks so big and clean and nice. Well, how could that be in a dystopian totalitarian state? It's because of the cheap energy created by figuring out how to harness the power of the hydrogen atom, which gives tremendous amount of energy with zero pollution. The only side effect or byproduct of this energy is water and the energy itself.
And then you make more hydrogen, of course.
Exactly.
No aliens then?
No, I thought about it, and I just decided that added another layer of complication that would just get in the way.
Okay. We've got the robots, obviously, and we've got, him using tech. That begs the question of a middle ground, which is the trope of a lot of future science fiction, the cyborg, the cybernetic organisms.
Yeah, I gave that some thought as well, and I think that probably will happen at some point. There are some characters that I thought Let's see. Somebody is saying something. That's exactly right. Yes. Yep. Very interesting.
Erlenberg is our Google.
I
He's our
did think
our
of,
Google.
I did think about the cyborg. There was a character that appears in the second story that I thought initially might be a cyborg, but turned out not to be. One thing that kind of surprised me is that by the time I started writing the second story, I realized I really liked the way Paula was drawing robots. And so there's going to be a robot or two in every story, regardless of whether it's a robot cop or not. And I told Paulo to take a look at the old Magnus Robot Fighter comics.
That's what I was going to bring up.
Yeah, not to rip off any designs, but just for general idea starting and inspiration. So Rammur's probably going to fight a robot at some point in every story.
Yeah, especially if you can look at the old ones. Go beyond the
the
stuff.
the gold key. Yeah,
those gold key. Those are they made that company right.
And nothing says the future like a robot.
Exactly. Even those old stories where the robots had like square heads and pipe arms. They're like, yeah, that's the future I want to be in. So
go ahead.
Here's our. I was trying to get into what people are going to get. This has a page number on it, so this is going to be inside the book.
Yeah, and this is an alternative cover that is not an alternative cover. It is inside the book, but it's also in the free giveaway, Rammur #0. And every one of my Facebook posts has a link to how you can get my newsletter, join the Rammur Early Adopters fan club, and get Rammur 0, which has a complete story or two in it and some previews. That is a cover that Paulo did that I decided was a little bit too busy. It had pretty much everything on it. It had all the elements, both in terms of words and visuals. I still like it, but I decided I wanted something simpler and cleaner for the cover. And you see the Tolar sign on that bag of money.
Absolutely, and it's just one L away from being a St. Louis Cardinals.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. This, I believe, is the contents page for the first issue. Now, you notice that sometimes he has a trench coat and sometimes he doesn't. That bolero-style jacket actually turns into the trench coat. It descends. And I'm not sure if it's by mental command or presses a button or whatever. And that covers up most of his gear. And there's a middle ground, which I call a car coat, which you'll see briefly as he changes from the bolero jacket to the trench coat and back. Maybe at some point he'll get stuck in that silly looking car coat mode.
That's an ingenious fashion design idea. The retractable length coat that just rolled up like roller shades inside the upper portion.
Well, and again, these things come out of necessity and conflict, because I actually had an artist that I was talking to before Paulo, who was semi-interested but thought Rammur was too ridiculous. And he made a couple of comments, and it occurred to me, well, it might be a good idea to have a trench coat to cover all that gear. And then I thought, but I don't want him taking the trench coat on and off. So how about if it just retracts?
And thus necessity was the mother of invention. Now somebody needs to go out there and kickstart this real coat idea, because I think that would be a lot of fun. Plus,
I'm waiting to see cosplay. When you see cosplay, you've made it.
Yes, and this would be relatively easy. The hardest part of cosplaying this is basically being a big enough dude. The rest of it's PVC pipe.
Well, you don't really need to look the part. At every convention of any size I've been to, there's always that hairy 300-pound guy dressed as Wonder Woman.
Yes, there is. Seen him. And fine. Where would you dig? We do a cosplay feature on Critical Blast every month called the Bombshell of the Month, and it's open to all amateur cosplayers. So if you're a cosplayer watching this and you want to show up your stuff, DM us on Twitter at Critical Blast.
And Snowberry, who we saw earlier with the ponytails, she would be pretty easy to do cosplay of. You just have to grab a hookah and create that outfit.
Yeah, now you're going to get a lot of the Flash fans finding you by searching Snowberry, because there's a whole shipper community. And I don't know if you watched the TV show or not, but
I've seen pieces.
Okay, well, despite the fact that Barry and Iris are married, as they should be, because of the comics, there's a lot that think that Barry and Caitlin Snow should be the item, and they've shipped them together as Snowberry.
Oh, interesting.
So you might get some random Google hits. Well placed there, sir. But there are going to be 6 different items in this book. I'm not going to say 6 stories, because obviously one of them here is the pinup by Matt Schick. But at least 4 stories, 3 backups, and
there's 4 complete stories, 24 pages, 6 pages, 4 pages, and 2 pages. There's the tops cover. There's the Dami propaganda poster. There's a 10-page making of section where we analyze how the splash page came to be, including my own sketch for the splash page, which I gave Paulo. I don't draw, but sometimes I can't explain in words what I want, so I'll do a really funky chicken scratch sketch, and Paulo's pretty good at figuring out what I'm trying to tell him with those sketches. There's the Matt Schick Dami propaganda poster. Now, my daughter lives in New York City, and she saw his art when he was working at the Strand bookstore, and she contacted me and she said, "You might want to get in touch with this guy. I think you'd be interested in his art." And I really liked what I saw, and I said, "Could you do a propaganda poster?" And all I told him is, I showed him the Dami design. I said, it just needs to say Dami loves you, and in the background I want to see the flag, the official flag of the Global Freedom Authority, the GFA. That was all I gave him, and this is what he came up with.
It's gorgeous. It's got a kind of a 60s feel to it.
Yeah, people have said that. I gave him no direction at all on it.
I think it's just the fat letters. It makes it very psychedelic, hippie kind of feel. And this is a completely different kind of look at Dami. Here she looks less like a statue and more like a real person.
Now, I gave this artist, Dave Barden, I gave him the Dami design as well. He took it in a different direction. I told him, I want kind of a Russian propaganda poster look for this. I want the robot cops, the Ruptors on it. I want the flag. We went back and forth on the colors for the flag, because the colors are not exactly right, but that's okay for the design. And the slogan there, in the future you will be a criminal. This is to suggest that there's so many rules and regulations that almost anything you do could potentially get you in trouble.
And so the people will most likely end up doing nothing. What do people do in your future society? I mean, they've got this free energy source now. Do they still? I mean, is it like the people on the ship in Wall-E? They just are a life of leisure now, or?
Well, it's kind of like the way contemporary China and Nazi Germany were structured, in that in a strictly communist government, the government owns all of the industries. But in Nazi Germany and China, you kind of have a hybrid of a capitalist society that's run by one-party rule. So the GFA allows private industry, even though it basically picks the winners and losers and makes sure that the head of every industry reports to someone in the bureaucracy. And it works okay, not because there's a lot of incentive to innovate and do great things, but because energy is so cheap that it allows for a pretty good economy.
Okay. So it's not like everybody's getting paid their
to sit around. No.
Yeah.
No. This is a possible second cover for the second issue. This is a very fast-moving robot getting the drop on Rammur. Rammur is stalking, surveilling a possible estate that he's going to rob, and he turns around and this thing is on him.
And it's big.
He barely heard it coming. Yeah, and this is not a robot cop. This is a privately held robot owned by the guy who runs the estate that Rammur was going to think about robbing.
I love the design. It's that retro future look on these robots, I think is.
Yeah, and Apollo is just so good at these designs, which is why there's going to be more robots.
Okay, so I scrolled down the big side of the page here. I didn't get into the stuff on the right side, which is where all the money takes place.
Yeah, the perks are real simple. I don't know if you know who Phil Russert is, but he just launched a crowdfunder with a comic with 17 different covers. I've got one. This is the cover, and the perks are very simple. You start out with the print version. You can get the print version with original sketch by Paulo. You can get the print version with the Dami poster signed by Matt Chick, or you can get the print version with both of those things. That's it. Now, part of the strategy here is practical. Most of it is practical because I just can't administrate the type of campaigns that I see out there. I don't have the time or energy. So this may be the simplest campaign for a comic book that's on Indiegogo or Kickstarter right now.
It's extremely simple. And I've been telling people, now that Kickstarter and Indiegogo both have implemented the add-on capabilities, I expect campaigns to go away from the whole 17 permutations of what can we put together, make sure you can have something, get it all, and just say, here's the book, and everything else is an add-on a la carte.
Yep. Yeah, and I thought about merchandise. There will be merchandise, and I think at some point I'm going to put on Facebook, what merchandise do you really like? And I don't mean specifically for Rammur. I just mean in general, what do you like? One of the things I thought about is, and I don't know if anybody's doing it, but it's really cheap and easy to do, are Pogs. Are Pogs making a comeback?
I've seen some people play around with the idea of Pogs. The things I see the most that I think people get the most use out of are the old school stickers, buttons, patches.
Yeah.
And the one thing I always impress upon people is that, especially on your first campaign, those are the only things you want to put on your first campaign. Don't go digging into the T-shirt world or the baseball cap world. I know you've got a Rammur hat on. But,
I don't.
Santino,
I don't. It's just pasted on a black baseball cap.
Okay, but for people starting off crowdfunding, nobody knows your character. Nobody loves it the way you do. You may think it's really cool to see him on a T-shirt, but if you want to do anything at all, go with the stickers, the buttons, and the patches, and make sure that it has your English readable logo on it.
Yep.
Because that's what people can see, think is cool, and Google to find out more about it.
Yeah, I think the Dami propaganda poster will probably get printed, and that may be my first bit of merchandising because I like it so much.
Yeah, it definitely looks cool. I'd hang one up in here.
And it'll be a mini poster. It'll probably be, I don't know, maybe 8x10 or maybe a little bit bigger than that, but it's not going to be ginormous, and it'll be on cardstock.
Yeah, well, the simplest prints I've seen lately, Charles, are basically the size of a comic book backer. Because it's flat in the Gemini mailer and
exactly.
It's so easy. We do have an interesting question from the chat here. Herwinberg says, apologies if we went over this, but we didn't. But if energy is so cheap and the economy is so robust in this one-party authoritarian state, what is worth stealing? Or does Rammur do it for the thrill?
Well, there's still money. And you can live a decent life working, a halfway decent job. But if you really want to live in luxury, you do need a lot of tollers. And Rammur likes to live a pretty nice and decent life. So that means stealing. And in the third story, in the third issue, he's going to be looking at gold. Gold is still going to be around, and it's still going to be a commodity, and it's going to be worth about 5,000 tollers per ounce, and that's something to steal. In the case of this statue, he's being paid a lot of money to steal this statue, and enough money that if he were to have a regular job, he might have to work the better part of a year to earn the money that he's going to get from stealing this statue.
Okay. Now, I notice he doesn't do much of anything to conceal his identity. So how does he live a life of luxury with, his face publicly known and his identity known?
Cloaking.
Okay. So
right now he's cloaked.
So in this picture right here that we're looking at.
Yeah, if there's a camera on him, and there probably is, they can't see him.
Okay. But
he has an electronic but he's electronically cloaked by against surveillance.
Okay. Now I'm going to throw the tough question out at you here, Charles. He's electronically cloaked if there's a camera on him. How do the robots chase him?
Because when they're on him, he's not in this location. He's flying away when they spot him.
Okay, but that's to my point there. Robots operate off of cameras as ocular things. So I would think that he would be, a blind spot to robots.
Well, I don't have a good answer for that, and hopefully people will not be thinking about that. It could be they're using heat. They're tracking him by the heat of his leg jets.
There you go. There's a human-shaped thing there that we can't focus on.
Good enough for me.
There you go. Okay, sort of like the old Jay Garrick thing. The face is a blur.
Yeah, we have to gloss over that kind of stuff, and part of the reason is that in a lot of crime stories, especially if it's in a book, the guys put masks on. Well, I want to see his face.
Yeah. So
I had to come up with an excuse to always see him.
You want to see the face, and that's the same reason why when an actor plays a superhero, they're always yanking off their face mask. I'm like,
well,
that
when I first heard that they were going to make a Judge Dredd movie with Sylvester Stallone, I had no doubt in my mind before I saw that movie that helmet was coming off in the first 10 minutes and it was not going back on. And I got to give the more recent movie, which I thought was really good, a lot of credit for keeping the helmet on.
Yeah.
And I got to give the actor and his agent credit for accepting that role.
Because a lot of actors don't want to do that. I mean, you watch The Flash, you watch Spider-Man, they're always ripping the mask off.
Yep. Yeah.
And usually in front of the villain, it's like, hey, look, we need to talk. I'm like,
but I needed an excuse to always be looking at Rammur, so I just kind of fudge with I mentioned electronic cloaking in a word or two in the captions, and we move on.
There you go. Don't have to dwell on it that way. All right, folks, if you're watching this in the chat, if you're watching this on a replay, and this looks like something that you want to get in on, it looks like it's a lot of fun. I love future stories, and I kind of like rooting for the bad guy when it's a relatable bad guy. The link to the Indiegogo is right below us in the description. We would love for you to smash that and come over here and pick one of these up. I didn't go through the. I didn't click through rather to see what the shipping would be because I've doxed myself.
Shipping is free in the U.S. and it will be whatever it is elsewhere. And I know that can be really expensive, but I think that people overseas know that as well. One thing that's important to mention is that the book is done.
That is very important to mention.
Completely and utterly finished. It is written, lettered, inked, colored, everything. It is done. That's why it's on Comixology, available digitally for $2.99.
All right. So you got 45 days left. Tells me you've been up for 15 days so far.
Exactly.
A $500 flexible goal, which means even if you don't make it, you're going forward. But let's make it, folks. It's $500. We can do this thing. Any idea of future stretch goals that you're going to throw at this, if any?
No, again, that's another administrative complication that I just can't get into. If people come to me and they say, you know what I'd really like as merchandise, I'll probably say, okay, yeah, I'll create that because I know at least I'll have one customer for it. I'm in this for the long haul. Rammur #2 is almost completely drawn. Rammur #3 is just getting underway as far as the drawing of it. The script is done, and I've just started to write the script for #4.
So this is going to be ongoing, not
going to be
a 4-part story arc and done.
No, ongoing, and everything is self-contained stories, although the first 3 stories are actually sequels. The second story is a sequel to the first, a direct sequel, and the third as well. But I will reward the longtime reader, but I don't punish the casual reader, because the second story will very briefly tell you what you need to know about what happened in the first story in maybe a sentence or two. Same thing with the third story.
There's a real art to that in comic book storytelling that has been lost.
Absolutely, completely lost. Marvel was excellent at it back in the day, but if you pick up, it's what Stanley used to say: every comic book is somebody's first.
Yes, yeah. I mean, you could pick up any copy of Spider-Man or Superman, and boom, page 1. It didn't matter if it was the second part of something. Within 2 text boxes, you knew what was going on, and there was Superman getting, punched or getting ready to go punch something, and you just along for the ride. Now you got this wall of text on the inside front cover.
Another thing I want to mention is there's no origin story, there's no backstory, there's nothing. Rammur just exists. I don't know where he came from. I don't care where he came from. He is.
Rammur is. Okay. That's the most simple. We need more crowdfunders like you, Charles. No stretch goals, no merchandise. Just, here's the book. Enjoy it and move on.
If it's more complicated than I can follow, then I can't write it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that makes sense to me. All right. So, Charles, thank you so much for coming and spending an hour with us tonight.
Thank you.
And presenting Rammur to our audience. Folks in the chat, definitely go back this. Share the video if you would, please. Not so much for our sake, but so that more people will come in and see this project and get to back it. Everybody runs a channel, always says smash like, share the video. That's because they want to drum their numbers up. And yes, we're monetized now, and we'll help that. But really share the video so that people can see our guests. That's what this channel exists for, is our guests, and to promote the independent comics market and get the books out there in front of a wider audience. So if you would do it for that reason, I would greatly appreciate it. And as always, we appreciate you showing up and just listening to us go on. And we just hope that while you were here,